So, to all of us, and to all of us online as well. So, day 3, third night of session, and the third case of the Blue Cliff record. So far, we're keeping steady in step with the Blue Cliff record. And the third case is Matsu, unwell, which seems to have a little bit of resonance, do you think, with where we are. We've had COVID, or at least the threat of COVID visiting us. So, as with everything that might visit us, that is difficult, challenging, how should we meet it? With what kind of mind should we meet? With what kind of heart and mind do we move with what is, moving with what is, which has been something of a theme through this session. There's a phrase in Liberation Within Obstruction which speaks of karma ripening. So karma ripens in every single moment. What is the ripening side of it? What is the ripe, the ready, the generously available side of this? Practice, of course, reveals practice. Zazen reveals Zazen, teaches Zazen. And you could say the nature of each borderless moment reveals each moment. There is nothing outside the immediacy. When we are in connection with that immediacy, when presence is immediate and unqualified, it is timeless. And this is very much part of what is running through this beautiful case. Very simple looking, very brief case, case 3. Great Master Matsu was unwell. The accountant monk asked, "How is your reverence feeling these days?" The great master said, "Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha." He would not have said it in a particularly emphatic way. He was unwell. But what he breathed out in that moment was this very round presentation of just what this moment is. So let's look into it. This would be a familiar way of speaking about the experience of time and the pressure of experience within time. How do we hold events as they run through our lives? Now, in this case, Matsu is unwell. And we can take that to mean that's a decided understatement. He was deeply unwell, probably quite close to his death. None of us know how close to our death we are, of course. But there were good signs that Matsu was close. So sun-faced Buddha. This has the implication of there are 800 golden years ahead of us, right now. Moon-faced Buddha, on the other hand, moon-face is born in the afternoon and dies in the morning. Brief, mortal, karmic reality. Whereas sun-faced Buddha has the feeling of eternity about it. From another point of view, it is the dream of eternity with which we flatter ourselves. that we don't have to be too concerned yet. Meanwhile, moon-faced Buddha is entirely the nature of this very body, the Buddha. It is mortal. It will vanish into dust. So why does Matsu and why do we and how do we hold these as not two? Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Ultimately, is not one discovered in the other. There's nowhere else. As we said repeatedly through the session, there is nowhere called else. There's no time called other than this. So this great master, Matsu, he really was often called that because he was the kind of lead figure of his moment in Tang Dynasty Buddhist China. He was a great figure, 709 to 788 are his dates. And so his life ran through the time often called the An Lushan Rebellion, the time of huge overturning of all the settings of social reality, life. It was a time of warfare that completely broke the fabric of the social order of China and had an enormous death toll from the famine, from the fighting, from disease that ran through a period of about 12 years and decimated the population. So Matsu was so important in this time for bringing forward Buddha mind as a medicine for such precarious, impossible, indigestible kind of time. He was the first to use the records of earlier masters, the narrative encounters with them, to upturn linear sense of time, to upturn dualistic consciousness, to tip it into a more open state that we sometimes call realization, a far more fertile state for responding to such a completely, it's the word we use far too often now, unprecedented situation. Some people have said the only equivalent rupture in the social order would be World Wars I and II put together. So a monumental moment of change. So he offered medicine for impossible times. Just as, in fact, our great vows are impossible. They're impossible vows as medicine for life in all of its suddenness. So this is where we find this encounter, very understated encounter, where the accountant monk, I'm interested by the fact that it's the accountant monk. This would be the monk in charge of planning, in charge of organizing and making everything balance. The figures of the books must balance. So this is the measuring kind of mind, measuring, organizing mind. And I think there's probably some anxiety in the accountant monk. If Matsu is close to death, he comes asking tentatively, how is your reverence feeling these days? So he's probing here. But I think it's also heartfelt. I feel there's a tenderness in the way he approaches. How is your reverence feeling these days? And there's tenderness in the response. Moon-faced Buddha, sun-faced Buddha. So how can we picture Matsu, as he says, sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, without distinguishing the two himself? They're both present. They are not two. They're not two, even in the way he probably shakily reaches for a glass of a cup of water. Or just shakes his head and says, not so good right now, it was a bit better last night. Aiken Roshi spoke once in some detail about Yasutani Roshi's last days. Yasutani, the teacher of Yamada, who is the teacher of Robert Aiken, who is the teacher of me, and on it goes. So Yasutani Roshi was in his last days of life. And when he was asked how he was feeling, he said, when I'm sitting, I'm all right, but when I'm standing, I'm short of breath. Now you must listen into this for sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Where does that come to rest? Where do these apparently radically two different presentations of dwelling in time come to rest in those words? When I'm sitting, I'm all right, but when I'm standing, I'm short of breath. There's modesty there, of course. It's not a drama, there's no drama of great illness. So listen for the way they come either way around. Hold them either way around. Both are held in each. Sun face, eternal, measureless time. Moon face, acute, only now, and short of time. There's a bit more detail about this because in the afternoon before Yasutani's last Jukai ceremony, Yamada Roshi came home and found him sitting in the living room, and that is where that exchange took place. He asked, how is your health these days? So close to the case. How is your health these days? Again, modest, tender, not imposing in any way. And that's when Yasutani said, and by the way, Yasutani is a fierce character. I don't know if you've ever seen a photograph of him, but he's like a bolt of lightning. At this point, though, he says, when I'm sitting down, it is all right. But when I stand, I'm very short of breath. Then after Jukai, and that, by the way, was a Jukai, among others, that included Robert Aiken himself. Both Aikens, actually. And he went and he stayed with his daughter, Yasutani, stayed with his daughter. And a few days later, he was dead. And that night, at the first memorial service for him, Yamada Roshi gave Teisho on this case. And gave access to everybody in that room the exacting words and moment that preceded Yasutani's death by just a few days. So each of these moments, the only moments we have, are timeless. Try to find the beginning or end of a moment. Try to find when your presence is strong. Try to find the time in that presence. Try to find, for example, how long is a moonrise? How long is that? When you're fully standing under the sky, watching the moon rise or set, how long is that? Can you time it when you're absolutely in it? So Master Matsu did not move outside of the moment, did not attempt to move outside of the moment he was in. And he just so completely went with it. In a sense, accepted both faces of that moment. Short and painful, timeless and edgeless, both at once. Not even both, Look further away, there is not two faces here. There's a verse in the Gateless Gate where women tells us one nen, or nien, same word, one nien sees eternity. Eternity is equal to now. One yen, a yen is the mind of one breath. So the mind of one breath sees eternity. Eternity is equal to now. So this is the spirit of Matsu, Great Master Matsu. And ultimately, what he's pointing to, or what actually he's simply embodying, is that there is no long, no short, to be found in that open state. In commenting on this case, Tenkai, who offers comments alongside Hakawin in a commentary on the Blue Cliff Record, Tenkai says, set your eyes on the absolutely inextricable within yourself. The inextricable nature, the inarguable self, beyond all ideas of self. And then it's impossible not to see that sun-face Buddha ignites and illuminates moon-face Buddha. Moon-face Buddha ignites and illuminates sun-face Buddha. And of course the word Buddha is saying mind awake. Buddha awake. Some of you have heard me speak in the past, because I come back to it a great deal in my own heart, a moment when, in 1999, when East Timor was being overrun by the TNI, and there were appalling things happening after the referendum that voted overwhelmingly to separate from Indonesia. And at that time, there was a big rally in Hyde Park in Sydney that I attended. And the most moving moment was when a woman got up and said, I want to mention the name of, and she named this East Timorese poet, whose name I couldn't catch, but I caught his words. And she said, he's listed at the moment among the missing or dead. And the poem is simply this: be here, be eternal. Be here, be eternal. So Marie Howe has had a bit of a run in this session, and she's going to have another one tonight. I want to just read a little of a poem, not the whole of it, but it's called Memorial. Excuse me. It's about the death of her friend, dear friend, Billy. But I want you to listen into it with the eyes and the ears of sun-face Buddha, moon-face Buddha. She says, as Billy died, the space between his breaths got bigger and longer. Then 3 quick breaths, a little gurgling of breath and blood. Then a long, silent space, and not another breath. Then one more, and that was it. His sister weeping, and something began to move through the room, as if energy were rising like thickening air, as if spirit were pleasure pushing through the room, through even our faces, a molecular, invisible if this was Billy, he was so vast. The way one field leads onto another. Vast to have been contained all that time in that body. A nearly unendurable joy. A steady outpouring for over an hour. So that when the men came back from dinner, they found Billy dead in the sheets, and the three of us almost drunkenly smiling. There's nothing much I want to add to that. For the quality of not to, without any conjecture about that moment. But if you've ever been in the presence of someone who dies, you'll know about the difference. You'll also know about the sense of a larger presence than can be contained. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, it's like a glimpse, a kind of fleshy glimpse of the matter. Embodied glimpse, perhaps. I'm not sure what the conversation yesterday in taking part in the gathering was, because Keenan gave what was no doubt a beautiful talk. But it led to a comment, in fact a poem from Una Sherrard. Those of you who take part in the gathering will know Una and love her too. And she commented in the poem, part of the poem said this, and she was referring back to a discussion that's been running through taking part in the gathering, a discussion of Shantideva's words, his mysterious words. May all sorrows ripen in me. May all sorrows ripen in me. So her comment, coming in the wake of, 3 months since her father, beloved father, died. She says in the poem, to see with both the divided and undivided at once. Is that where sorrows ripen? Is that where sorrows ripen? To see with both the divided and undivided at once. And a little later in her poem, she says this about her father, the loss of her father. This loss somehow brings intimacy with all sorrows. I try to carry it with tenderness, open it to all, and when I do, that beauty allows the love that connects all things to shine through. There's something very wise in this, the allowing of the raw fact to become tenderness itself, allowing grief to become a kind of tenderness that must be shared, that can't be not shared somehow, can't not radiate out. So this sorrow, this very deep sorrow, I try to carry it with tenderness, open it to all, and when I do, that beauty allows the love that connects all things to shine through. So I feel as though great Matsu, he was often called Great Master Ma. Matsu is opening this breadth within suffering itself, his own suffering, to see just how luminous the divided and the undivided come together. And the suffering itself is without pity. It's humble. It's ordinary. And it's very wide. It has no, no resistance. It has the beauty of no resistance. It just is, and moving with that current, it just is. He moves with just what is. So, sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, who can tell them apart? And at our best, who could even dream of trying? So I'd like to open this out now in another case from the Blue Cliff record, a bit further on, staying loyally to the Blue Cliff record throughout this session. So this is case 36. Changsha goes picnicking. So one day, Changsha went on a picnic in the mountains. When he returned to the gate, the head monk asked, "Your Reverence, where have you been wandering?" "I have come from strolling about in the hills," said Changsha. "Where did you go?" Actually, the characters literally say, "Where did you come and go?" asked the head monk. Changsha said, "First I went following the scented grasses, then came back following the falling flowers." "That is spring mood itself," said the head monk. Changsha said, "It is better than the autumn dew falling on the lotus flowers." And Swedu piped up and says, he's the compiler of the Blue Cliff record, said, "I am grateful for that answer." Changsha, incidentally, like Jiaozhou, was a student of Nanchuan, and his dates are later than Matsu, 788 to 863. So I love the fact that this case includes the word picnicking. It's like a breath of open, fresh air under the sky. It also has ease in it. Why not go picnicking? Why not go wandering in the hills and picnicking if you're Changsha, who, by the way, his nickname was the Tiger Chen because he once jumped right on top of Yang Shan in a narrative encounter that got a bit physical and knocked him to the ground and then jumped on him. Quite unusual sort of narrative encounter. But as a result of that, he was called Tiger Chen from then on. But in this instance, we find him in a very broad kind of mood. So when the head monk sees him come into the gate from picnicking, he asks him a question that's a little bit like, "Where have you been wandering? What's going on with you these days?" It's something of a Dharma challenge, in fact. And Changsha's very broad. He says, "I've come from strolling about in the hills." And then the head monk says, "Whoa, where did you come and go? And by implication, are you coming and going? Is there somewhere to come and go in this eternal and only moment?" Well, Changsha is very free within that. He says, "Where first I went following the scented grasses, then came back following the falling flowers." Now, it's important at this point to know that this is the traditional word said in a funeral service for monks and nuns. It would be in the form of, "First you went out following the scented grasses, then you came back following the falling flowers." So scented grasses, falling flowers, you've got to let yourself look into these phrases. from one point of view, which one is spring? Which one is autumn? Which is which? What's what here? Obviously, there's the image, the energy anyway, of going out into the world, starting with being born, then crawling, then walking upright, and then, following the scented grasses, following the fresh scent of life. Scented grasses also has the undertone meaning of the teachings. The grass tips, each grass tip, a Dharma point. But more loosely, more generously, it's expansive, confidently expansive. And then came back following the falling flowers. Flowers are destined to fall. They do that. That is what they do. They bloom and they fall. So there's a kind of undertone here of body's age. They get creaky. Knees especially become annoying. So the falling flowers, this is the wear and tear of life. It's also, of course, the traction we spoke about the other night, without which we're foolish. We're utterly foolish. We slip over on a world that has no traction, no experience, no truth and value of suffering. So there's a sense in these phrases of autumn mixed with spring, spring mixed with autumn. Autumn always carries as well, because we come to the next part where the head monk, in a sense, is offering an affirmation. He's saying that is spring mood itself. But we have Shangsha rejecting that subtly and saying it is better than the autumn dew falling on the lotus flowers, meaning spring mood. Spring mood could be taken as being very involved in the world, being out and about, and maybe there's a bit of chastising in that head monk. What were you doing out there for so long? That kind of thing. The autumn dew falling on the lotus flowers is a classical image of awakening, of body and mind falling away, autumn, autumnal. And dew on the lotus flowers, well, that's how beautiful that is, how delicate and so on. How fragrant, how exquisite. But Changsha is favouring spring mood itself, and Sui Do is grateful for his answer. So there's this lovely sense of waking up to life, letting go even of life itself, not clinging even to something as immeasurably precious as life itself. Hakuin has a comment, and for me it actually echoes the words of Yasutani in its own way. Yasutani said, "After I have transcended birth and death, I will go wherever my toes take me." Well, Hakuin says this, driven by enthusiasm, he's now talking about the case, driven by enthusiasm, drawn by the fragrant grasses, he goes, forgetting himself. This is splendid. When the fun was over, he came back, and when returning, he also forgot himself in the falling flowers. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. What kind of self-conscious self is present there? What kind of self-conscious, precious sort of sense of self is there in going out, following the scented grasses? Then entirely naturally, coming back, following, moving with the falling flowers. So the spring mood itself, this is the world of living. This is the world of coming and going, as in falling in love. It's the hazy moon of being a human being, hazy moon of enlightenment. In a sense, the head monk is saying, oh, are you a bit astray, and that kind of thing. And Changsha really makes it clear that coming or going, he's never astray. What can compare with the hazy moon of enlightenment on a spring night that comes from another poem, this time from Kaisan? There's nothing to dislike, nothing to lament. I think Changsha is saying, why don't you take a walk out there? Why don't you move with ease like a leaf in the breeze? Robert Aiken commented, in that deep, pure state of autumn, that's the lotus dew autumn, there's no one and no one to save. Wonderful, and yet. Then he says, this is Robert Aiken's words, that pure, cool autumn mood must be abandoned for the liveliness and haziness of spring among the many beings. It's where we live. It's what life is. Come forth. So better than autumn dew in the lotus, it's probably good to have your toes wet with autumn dew, I think. It's probably good to have tears and laughter too, I think, and groans. And could you please hand me that glass of water? There's a poem, I don't know if Ron is here tonight. Are you here, Ron? Yes, you are. There's a haiku of Ron's that I like a lot. It somehow sums up for me, probably didn't for you, Ron, but it does for me, this freedom, of this timelessness within coming and going. It also has radical acceptance in it, as it must, as every haiku must. Snails asleep at the end of their trails. Starless night. I don't know why I like it so much. I just think it's good. Snails asleep at the end of their trails. And of course you can see the trails even on a starless night. You can just see them. Starless night.
I couldn't hear the last line.
Say?
I couldn't hear the last line.
Starless night.
Scarlet, okay.
Okay. So let's wind up this picnic with, first of all, I just want to mention Daniel Berrigan's words, which in a sense about pointing, Daniel Berrigan being the Catholic priest who was part of the, what were they called? The ones...
Plowshares 9, is it?
They attacked
Plowshare.
the Plowshare 9, that's it. They broke into a missile silo and they poured blood onto the missile and hit it with a few hammers, which didn't actually do much. And then they waited, knowing that they would soon be arrested and imprisoned. They did it anyway. But Daniel Berrigan writes, these many beautiful days cannot be lived again, but they are compounded in my own flesh and spirit, and I take them in full measure toward whatever lies ahead. And that's the spirit of moon face, sun face. One Buddha, one awake state. So, we and all things under the sun and the moon, we are made in time. We form and change in time. Time is change. There's no time. There's no time outside the exact moment of this moment of change, changing. So, at the same time, each of us is the disappearing point of time. Moon face, sun face. And as for falling flowers, each moment in a sense is our birth and our death. We are born into the moment. We die into the moment. And this is the fact that everything is doing the same thing, born into the moment, dying into the moment. Impossible to tell apart, impossible to divide. And this is an open secret that is everywhere apparent, and it is lived by us every moment. And that is where, if we're going to find ease, if the practice is at heart, the coming to rest in complete ease, we find it in that exacting quality of time that is no time. So, as a capping verse, I'll give you one more of Marie Howe's poems, because it has many things, but one thing it has is a sense of how richly the dead, our beloved dead, inform us and continue to do so. So she calls this my dead friends. I have begun, when I'm weary and can't decide an answer to a bewildering question, to ask my dead friends for their opinion. And the answer is often immediate and clear. Should I take the job? Move to the city? Should I try to conceive a child in my middle age? They stand in unison, shaking their heads and smiling. Whatever leads to joy, they always answer. To more life and less worry. I look into the vase where Billy's ashes were. It's green in there, a green vase. And I ask Billy if I should return the difficult phone call. And he says, yes. Billy's already gone through the frightening door. Whatever he says, I'll do. Thank you for trouble.